I don't care about your lands, beliefs, or petty squabbles. I don't care if you're a freedom fighter or a terrorist, dictator or president. Monsters will not be allowed to roam free.
You call yourself Superman fans. How could you do this? How could you do this to the Man of Steel?
I remember you actually warning me when you came to pitch me the idea of directing on this one. You're like, I got a Superman movie for you. I don't know if you want to work on it.
Yeah. I remember when they came to me with this and were like, what do you think about Injustice? And I knew the video games, but I wasn't as familiar with the comic books. And I was like, well, let me read the outline and let me take a look at the books. And I did, and I was like, wow. I could see what was good about it. I could see why people liked it, and I could find that sort of that piece of Superman that we like in it.
Right.
But at the same time, the stuff that we put him through is so horrible.
Oh, brutal.
That I didn't know if you wanted to be the person that did this to him.
Well, it almost felt like for me after you told me that, and after I saw some of this stuff, it was almost like I felt like I had a responsibility to kind of get in there and try to keep Superman as I could.
Yes.
Going through all of this stuff.
You know, that's a good point. Many of the viewers will have just watched the movie, so you might want to just put this on pause for a while and go get some tea and just like calm down a little, because you've been through a lot, and these men put you through it. So, Ernie, were you familiar with the game before this?
I came through it. I came to Justice League Injustice through the image of Superman putting his fist through the Joker's body, right? And I go, oh, I'd like to read that. And then I read it, and then actually I talked with you about it, and I go, have you read this thing? And you were like, oh, you know, a lot of people don't like it because it comes from a video game. And I'm like, I don't care where it comes from. This is like a fun story with a lot of things that I've never seen done before. You know,
I actually think what it was they gave me a stack of the trade paperbacks, all those Tom.
You were like, I don't want to read this.
Tom Taylor books, and it's a tremendous amount of material, and they're really amazing.
Yeah.
And I knowing that you are an avid reader, I thought that you had a chance of making it through.
Yeah, because you didn't want to do it yourself. Right?
That's a lot of reading. I tend to look at the pictures.
How do you hurt Superman?
Yeah.
Right.
He's invincible. I mean, yeah, kryptonite. But how do you really hurt him? And I think it's what would hurt you.
Right.
You know, what would happen if something happened to your kid? Like, that's what people can identify with, you know? That's why you understand why he does what he does to a certain extent. It's like,
And I think Joker also is not your typical villain in the sense that it's like, I'm going to perform this act and I'm going to end on something. I'm going to rob a bank and I'll have the $1 million. I'm going to do something. He is just absolute chaos. And by being that kind of embodiment of chaos, he doesn't care if he's going to come out of this alive. So I don't think he was even thinking at all about, you know, how
what
to
happens
survive.
then?
I don't think
that's not where he lives.
It's not even that he cares about coming out of this alive. He expects that he won't.
Right.
That's his plan.
Right.
You know, is to get Superman to kill him and cross that line. And
He wants something to happen, you know, and he wants a win. After all the stalemates with Batman, he thought he would go on to something easier, Superman.
Yeah. And like you said, there's something interesting too that like once he's taken out, it almost polarizes the superhero community where there's a lot of people who are like, well, shouldn't he have been taken out a lot sooner? You know, and it's just kind of this thing. If he's so inherently evil, if he's just completely irredeemable, then there's that divide that happens between the group of superheroes. So some people just wanted him gone and they sympathize with Superman, and others are like, but that's not what we do.
Right. Right.
I think, you know, look, everybody here loves, and watching this, loves Batman and Superman. But every now and again, you read a Batman and a Joker story, and they get into it. And at the end of it, I was like, he's just going to get out again.
What's really great about the comic, and Ernie, what you brought with it with the screenplay, is that feeling of like we're creating an alternate reality for DC that from the moment Superman kills Joker, it creates this entirely different universe that we're now following down the path, and it feels completely new. it doesn't follow the typical, superhero things that we've seen in DC before.
Right. There's a reality where Joker's plan doesn't come to fruition,
Right.
and it resolves the way that you would expect it to resolve.
Right.
That's our
This
reality.
is not that one.
Right, exactly.
What were some of the most shocking moments in the piece for you?
For me, it's the number of deaths. I mean, like superhero deaths. I don't know that it actually dawned on me while we were making it, but then after we watched it the first time, I was like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
there goes the Flash. And
Decimate 'em
now-
all.
And Hawkman's gone, and Cyborg's dead, and it's wow, it's pretty crazy.
We talked about that Flash death early on, which
Yeah.
I think is a change from the comic. Do you remember?
Yeah, we didn't want anything cosmic treadmill-y to be able to rewind, so we wanted it permanent in this world.
And for those of you at home who don't know, the cosmic treadmill is the most important piece of exercise equipment in the DC universe. And if you can go quickly enough on it, you can change time. And so the idea was we didn't want to do because as soon as a major hero died, you would say, okay, have Flash go back and change this. So sawing off his legs seemed like a good idea at the time.
We wanted to eliminate the easiest solution.
Yeah.
Rick, having come off of another property with blood and violence, did you consider looking inside the Joker's chest and doing any kind of like salami sausage cut through and see really what's in there?
Yeah, no, the thought did occur, but Matt stopped me. No. No, but I think for me, the most shocking moment in the film, to me, was when Superman unleashes on the club kids, on the Joker kids, because that's really the turning point in the film where you realize he's gone.
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because you don't want to see your hero fall that far.
Yeah.
No, and what's great about it is Wonder Woman, who's been such a badass and so dark in this movie.
You killed these children because they angered you?
No, I killed them because a lesson had to be learned. I have to be strong, like you said.
She gives him the side eye, and like, whoa, what did you do?
Well, I think that's the point where she's been the devil on his shoulder, kind of pushing him the whole time, and then it's like, uh-oh, what did I unleash here?
Yeah, I agree. It made me wonder what's going on Paradise Island, for sure.
That was kind of an interesting thing that we had talked about before, is how far do you take loyalty, right? Being loyal is supposed to be a great thing, right?
Right.
But do you do it like after decision after decision after decision? Then you're kind of just like a bloodthirsty dictator stooge after a while.
I had hoped killing the Joker children was a momentary madness. I see now that it's not.
And I see I'm the only one I can trust.
Well, Matt, you never told us what your favorite shocking moment was.
Well, I don't know if it's my favorite shocking, but definitely the most shocking moment that I had was definitely Lois's death. I mean, that was something that just reading it was like, as a Superman fan, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really going to be hard. But it totally is the necessary thing that obviously starts everything. And it just explains essentially what would cause Superman to unravel the way that he does. For me as a Superman fan, it actually helped me zero in on essentially his hurt. And that was something that we really focused on, and we would talk about that too, is like to make sure that the motivation was not some maniacal, like, going to be a dictator of the world, but rather one of somebody who's like, I don't want people to have the hurt that I went through happen.
Yep.
That takes away the mustache twirl, from Superman's, evil actions.
The super dickery of it.
Exactly.
But we did talk about that a lot as far as that motivation. I remember us having conversations because we were both really concerned about the way that Superman went down this path and sort of keeping it all rational and in character. I mean, at a certain point he breaks. Even that is sort of justifiable when he kills the Joker kids. I mean, they're celebrating a terrorist, right? This guy that killed.
Well,
That is
people.
definitely a bridge too far, but you understand how he got there.
Right.
And also, I think it's funny because, he kills, 11 million people in Metropolis, the Joker. But that's not the death you feel. You only feel
Right.
Superman's wife dying, when Lois dies and their unborn child dies. That's really what he's getting, what changes him.
And
I'm sure
Metropolis.
I'm sure he would have been more upset. I was very upset about Metropolis, but Lois is key to keeping him human. You
Yeah.
know, and it's what grounds him. And Ernie, to your credit, the scene of him talking about when he finds out they're going to have a baby, what college is he going to go to? You know, and he should have a job after school, and you know, it's super charming and in some ways such a small scene. That regular people would go through, and then to juxtapose that with space and the illusion of doomsday and all those things, that's the fun.
It's
of
a
these
very
superhero
good.
things.
It's a very good test laboratory, but it's a test laboratory of odd pairings and having them have the time to talk to each other.
Yeah.
You know, such as Harley and Green Arrow.
Yep.
By the way, Green Arrow's death doesn't even make the list of our most shocking.
I know.
No. Ollie.
So like, to me, this movie, and we talked about it a little bit, was you sort of felt a responsibility to like, okay, if we're gonna go down this dark path with these characters and have them sort of break away from the heroes that we know, I almost felt like I wanted to do that to make sure that it was done in a respectful way.
Right.
You know, that we didn't just make him a cartoon villain that just had no motivation. I mean,
Yeah,
this
like,
movie
we-
sets it up.
Superman is, you know, Superman gets turned evil. That's like kind of boring to me.
Yes.
Right.
But him making the little decisions that puts him down the proverbial slippery slope, like that's fascinating.
And I think that's what's really important in this movie is seeing that, and at least initially, you know, these are things. Superman killing the Joker. I imagine there's a lot of people out there that are going to go, finally.
Yes.
And Wonder Woman says it in the movie, or Robin says it in the movie. Should have done it a long time
Yeah,
ago.
and why didn't Batman do it a long time ago?
Right.
I'm certainly unqualified to talk about politics, but I think that there's a kind of a fairness to this movie that it looks at both sides. If Batman gets his way, people are going to die, and it's messy. And there is some irony in watching a vigilante, you know, advocate on behalf of
So
due
we have-
process and law and order,
right.
and Superman, who is, you know, a clean-cut Boy Scout, saying, "Get me those T-spheres because we got to watch everybody all the time."
I think that's something that I really liked about this movie was that we also took our time to show the characters progress into whatever decision they end up taking. And it was like with Wonder Woman, like you were saying, it's like, you know, it's like she suddenly becomes aware of the choices that she's made very far down the pipe. And it's like at that point she has to do a self-reflection. And I think it gives a certain respect to the character because it shows the character is on a pathway that is very important to them. And they don't see it in like an evil way, the way that we later find out that they'll come to reflect on it. You know?
No, I think they think it's justice. We can't just let people go free.
You start out with going, you know what? I want to stop all the killing in these genocidal wars.
Sounds
And
great.
It sounds awesome. Who's against that? And then you're allied with Ra's al Ghul. It's like, wait a
I
second.
want the same thing.
What happened?
I offer my loyalty and my support to your vision of the future.
My grandfather has never bowed to anyone.
That's the important thing. Like, what do you have to do to make that happen? And ultimately, is it worth it? I mean, I think it's really important that you see those views and that they have different point of views, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, because that's what creates the conflict. That's, you know, what puts them down these paths. So,
Well, in some ways, there's kind of a religious overtone to it. It's like, what is free? If you have free will, then the things you get to choose can cause destruction and death and suffering. And if you are put in a lucite box, not able to touch or interact with anybody else, and you're just happy and safe and peaceful, you're not really alive. You're just a mold, you know. So for a superhero movie with a very high death count, You're really playing with some interesting themes here.
Yeah, I definitely think so, and it's credit to Ernie to be able to weave that stuff in. I mean, we cover a lot of territory in this film, but I still think those themes come through, even though we've still got like tons of action and superhero fights and big superhero moments, like
And
those
jokes, by the way.
Can we watch Absolutely Amish now? I'm dying to see if Goody Ann finishes her spice rack before Rumspringa.
Whenever those jokes hit, I was like, well, that's Ernie. that one is definitely Ernie.
We haven't even mentioned how interesting it was to do the Bat family. Batman, he has fractures within the Bat family.
Yeah.
And then I got
Like a real family.
Yeah, and it's also about love and loss, obviously, right? So Superman
That's a great point.
loses Lois. Batman and Catwoman, she's trying to keep Batman. Harley actually loses the Green Arrow, right?
Yeah, I mean, Batman loses his kid too.
God,
Yeah.
we
In the same way that
did no
Superman-
one mention Nightwing?
Yeah,
That
I know,
was
I know.
tough to
That's-
watch.
yeah.
That one was the way you animated it. Thanks for putting it in 3 times.
So Batman and Superman both face tragedies. What's different about them that they cope with it in such different ways?
You know, I don't know. It's a very good question. It's because Batman, I think this is probably the first movie that I can think of with Batman where he breaks down like that and actually in such an emotional way. I mean, Batman sobs in this movie. Like
It's great.
I've never seen that.
I would like if that is not a GIF animated file that people use for sadness and connection and loss. But it's great. I was thinking that in some ways Batman had to handle it as a child.
Yes, but he's had the time to sort of
yes.
internalize all of it
It's
and
become a
live with
lifestyle.
it forever.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that you notice in this film, as he becomes bad Superman, there's a lot of blame. He blames Batman, you know, like, or he
feels
you taught
betrayed.
me how to do this.
Yeah.
This was because of you, he tells him. You know, with Wonder Woman, it's like, no, I was teaching him a lesson, like you said, you know, stuff like that. He's not taking complete responsibility for his actions at this point, which I think is the difference with what Batman does.
It seems to be a movie about Superman losing Lois Lane, but the parallel is Harley losing the Joker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do they react? In the exact opposite that you would call. Harley becomes good.
Hero Harley.
And becomes evil because of their losses. And I'm like, you're just never going to be able to do that in any other situation. There are things in this movie that you won't get away with anything that's in continuity or any place else,
And I
because it
think-
is an elf's world.
I think
right?
that's the fun of it all, is being able to explore those aspects of the character that you would normally not be able to, you know?
You know what I have to say is thinking about that Harley as a hero. What's wonderful is that that you guys kept her character consistent. She was still a lunatic. She was still a sociopath.
Yeah.
But so seeing her in a meeting with Batman and and having Batman ask her to be quiet, you know, just made it was great.
Sit down, both of you.
I always thought it was really interesting that it was almost ironic because it was like, I think that it's almost Superman going dark the way he does essentially motivates her to, or gives her the opportunity to become good, because she goes into hiding, you know, they got to protect her. So she's spending more time around heroes, and then she even teams up with Green Arrow. And so it kind of creates like this reforming, you know, environment for her to kind of become a better person and everything. But like you said, we try to make it sure that we weren't going to lose who she was. She wasn't going to suddenly just turn over a leaf and suddenly become this noble character.
No, I mean, she was complicit in the murder of millions of people.
When I read the outline and you kept Plastic Man, I was really surprised, because Plastic Man in some ways always seems like he's from another universe. Same way the Shazam family seemed like, why is there a talking tiger talking to Batman? Always kind of sets you off a little. But I thought that in this case, Plastic Man worked great.
Well, you're right. I mean, and especially in a film like this that's so dark, Plastic Man does seem like an odd choice, you know. But I think it's necessary to have him and a character like Harley to sort of take some of the edge off. Otherwise, the whole thing is just bleak and serious and dark. And, you know, I think Plastic Man is that little bit of light, that little bit of connection to the traditional heroes that we know them as.
And it was fun to see him actually do a jailbreak. It felt like we did a little heist movie in the middle of it, you know, which just made it even more like kind of adventurous and fun, which this movie, you know, with being as dark as it was, it could have obviously not gone that way, but we had that opportunity.
Right.
Well, and he was a criminal. He had been a criminal before, so it kind of made sense. But also, he has a little attitude in this that you don't usually see. It made sense. It's kind of shocking when he, you know, becomes a sheet of plastic and tries to wrap up a mazo. Because you've also just seen that locomotive hit. It's so big and strange, but at the same time, he's still got attitude, and he does that great flip-off joke with the key.
Hey, look! I found the key.
But I think it is funny because it does sort of come across that Batman sort of underestimates him too. You know, he sets him on these sort of big things, but then when it comes down to it at the end, he's like, you stay out of this battle.
Yeah.
You know? And then it's Plastic Man that's like, forget it. Like, I'm doing this. And he's the one that really defeats Amazo.
Yeah.
And it feels also like at the moment when Batman employs him to do the jailbreak, it almost feels like we're at that moment where Batman has exhausted all his supplies, you know?
Yeah.
Like he's now at hideout number 25, you know, which is like got leaky pipes and everything like that. It's no longer the millionaire lifestyle for him and stuff. And he's almost desperate. He's like, I'm going to start pulling Plastic Man to start doing stuff for me, you know?
It's basically him, Catwoman, and Harley. And that's it.
Yeah.
Hey, ladies.
We're gonna lose so hard.
Ernie, I would love to give you credit for that quiver joke about the Arrow Cave, but that is from Tom Taylor.
I steal a lot of great stuff from Tom. Thank you, sir. I thought that was one of the great relationships of the comic book adaptation of
the game,
of the video game, and I'm like, there's no way I'm getting rid of this. This pairing is just too fun. You know, I'm going to try and amp it up if anything. And yeah, it's one of my favorite parts of the movie. There's so many little cherry things. I hope people like it.
When I was reading the books, you know, that relationship in particular, I thought was like, wow, what an odd pairing. Like, you really did feel like you started to care for them. Like, he did a pretty good job with, you know, making those two feel like
natural.
Yeah, exactly.
How many layers you think Batman has?
Gotta be running low if we're using a toilet elevator.
When he does end up dying, it hits her hard. You know?
Yeah, well, she's just lost her second partner. It's heartbreaking.
Green Arrow was hurt and you left him there? Maybe he was fine.
He had a hole in his head.
How'd you like a hole in your head?
Well, I think the strength of it also is that Elseworld can have a beginning, middle, and end. Whereas our stories are dropping you in the middle of a soap opera and you get a piece of it. And maybe you get the beginning, middle, and end of this adventure, or even this character arc of this character, but it's going to go on. And I suppose even to some extent this movie does the same thing in that there will be consequences, but we're never going to see them.
It could. I mean, but it does. I think it does have an ending, you know, and that's a nice thing to be able to do with these characters, is actually show like Superman's learned something, you know, Batman has learned something also, and you know what came out of all this stuff that we just watched for 2 hours, right?
And in fact, that Superman in this movie faces consequences. It's like when he comes to terms with the fact that he's done all these crimes and it finally sinks in what kind of terrors he brought about, he definitely feels responsibility for it, but Batman doesn't let him off the hook. And there's going to be, you know, that kind of...
Yeah, I think that was important because if we did bring in that alternate reality Lois that just happened to be pregnant and Superman goes off into the sunset with her, it's like, no, you don't deserve this.
No.
Look at what you've done.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
How did it come to this? What have I done? I deserve death.
As bleak as this movie is, as dark as it is, as emotional as it all is, like, I didn't want to dwell in that too much, you know. There should always be, I feel like, there should always be that sort of ray of hope at the end, you know. And to me, it's, you know, Batman kissing Catwoman and being like, you letting his humanity show a little bit more. And he's even, you know, there's the little scene where he kind of smiles as much as Batman ever will, I suppose. But like,
I think there is I wouldn't say it's a happy ending, but it's certainly a satisfying conclusion in that Superman feels remorse. He has some understanding of what he's done.
Yes.
And it's not going to happen again. The geopolitical aspects of this movie are so, in some ways, they are more shocking than Superman Red Sun, because that was a period piece, and you knew deep down that you couldn't root for Soviet Superman because, well, for obvious reasons. But here, he's our Superman. And he's just making other choices that, and they all on the surface look so great. He's brought together the Israelis and Palestinians and the North Korea disarmament and all these things that you want. But then on the flip side, there's just a dark side of a payoff.
You feel uncomfortable seeing his method of bringing about all those great things.
well, because it's not fixing anything.
Right.
Yes.
He's making it happen.
You know, obviously our society today is very combative, and I think probably exasperated. I don't know if that's
Exacerbated.
Exacerbated. Thank you, non-wordsmith. By social media, where your opinions are echoed constantly by people who agree with you, and so anyone who doesn't agree with you seems like they're insane. And that's certainly the situation in this movie, where each group thinks the other's insane. Superman looks at Batman's side and says, "Why are you advocating for people to kill each other needlessly?" And Batman says, "Why do you want to be a tyrant and have absolute control over everyone?"
Right.
And there is no answer to that unless we can bring them together. And the only person evidently to do that is an alternate world's Lois Lane who's pregnant. So that's our best hope.
Well, I think, you know, to that question is like, even the way that you framed it, like, Batman doesn't think that this is okay. Like, he doesn't think that it's okay that the Joker continually escapes and murders people over and over again, and he never puts a real stop to it. He's not cool with that. He wants it to be stopped, but how do you do it without being a tyrant?
Yeah.
Taking everyone's freedom. So that there's always a trade-off there, right? There's a great scene in there where Superman's talking to the UN.
All hostilities will stop, or I will stop them.
And the assembly sort of sits there for a beat, and they look horrified as he's making the speech, but then they stand up and cheer.
They're thrilled.
But I think it really could go either way. I mean, what he's saying is actually a very scary thing from a certain point of view. On the other hand, it sounds very good to be promised this sort of safety.
Right.
And we always live in this.
Right.
The more,
especially now.
But no, but I think the more safety we get, the less freedom we have. I mean, we live in the fulcrum of a giant scale between, I mean, justice and grace. Where on one side you're forgiven, but if you're forgiven everything, then there is no justice. So we want both.
There was something you said earlier that I thought really kind of hit, the idea of nuance and the idea that, you know, people get very rigid about their beliefs and stuff. And I think that's hopefully what I got out of working on this, is the idea that if you subscribe to a rigid ideal and you don't allow for a nuance, you're going to lose, like, you know, the moral battle, because you're not going to be able to, like, understand the other side. And I think that was something that I always thought was really great about, you know, the idea of focusing that there's a person on the other side.
I think that, to me, the most interesting thing is that philosophical problem that this film wrestles with.
They're tough questions, and some people don't want to work on those sort of things, you know, or put themselves in that position.
It's totally understandable. And I think the fact that the movie does not have a very neat, happy ending, it has a kind of a muddy, messy ending, is totally honest, because that's probably what we face in the real world. And it's really only the fact that they're costume superheroes that make these problems addressable for us because we care about these people as opposed to people in the real world who we don't really care about. Well, anyway, as you can see, we have solved all the problems of the world and the internet, and you can see it's getting very late here in Gotham City. So, but there are a few places open that are probably safe to go to. So we're gonna head out on the town. We're gonna mask up and
Excellent.
and, hit some night spots.